Chapter 1. 9 years ago, to save her sister, Nina Sterling voluntarily bound herself to the companion system and entered Julian Blackwood's life. As per the system's instructions, she had to assume the identity of a mute and pursue Julian Blackwood, a man who seemed to have it all. Soon, everyone in their circle knew the story. A mute girl was madly in love with Julian Blackwood. At a party, the man finally relented. "I'll let you stay by my side, but only if you get plastic surgery to look like Rosalie Jennings." Without a second thought, Nina borrowed money for the surgery, all to achieve a 70 resemblance to Rosalie, the woman Julian held in his heart as his one true love. She learned to cater to his preferences, trying every conceivable way to please him. Though he seemed to treat her as nothing more than a maid, heaping only shame and indifference upon his mute wife. But Nina didn't care. Once her time was up, she could leave this world behind. It was 1 a.m, and Nina Sterling had been waiting in the living room for 5 agonizing hours. Yesterday was her birthday, and also her and Julian Blackwood's 7th wedding anniversary. She rubbed her aching neck and carried the elaborate 9-course meal she had so carefully prepared over to the trash can, dumping it all inside. Staring at the soupy mess, she felt a wave of dizziness. 9 years ago, she had bound herself to the companion system and entered Julian Blackwood's life. As per the system's instructions, she had to assume the identity of a mute and pursue Julian Blackwood, a man who seemed to have it all. Soon, everyone in their circle knew the story. A mute girl was madly in love with Julian Blackwood. At a party, Julian finally relented. "I'll let you stay by my side, but only if you get plastic surgery to look like Rosalie Jennings." Without a second thought, Nina borrowed money for the surgery, all to achieve a 70 resemblance to Rosalie, the woman Julian held in his heart as his one true love. She learned to accommodate his tastes, learned to cook, learned to take care of him. Though he seemed to treat her as nothing more than a maid, she didn't care. As soon as the 9 years were over, she could leave this world behind. She treated her kindness toward Julian as her job. She humbly submitted to his every demand, including marriage, and Julian Blackwood was completely oblivious to it all. At 1:30 a.m., Julian stumbled through the door. Seeing the cold, empty living room, a flicker of anger ignited within him. No matter how late he came home, Nina had never failed to wait up for him before. He furiously slammed the unwashed dishes onto the floor, yanked off his tie, and dragged Nina from her sleep. "Nina Sterling, today is our wedding anniversary. Why did you go to bed without waiting for me?" Her head still fuzzy with sleep, Nina began to form signs with her hands. But Julian's impatience only grew. "Stop with that pointless gesturing. I can't understand it anyway." "Go run my bathwater," the force holding her back suddenly released, and before Nina could react, she fell onto the scattered shards of broken porcelain on the floor. A sharp, stinging pain shot through her elbows and knees, and a coarse, guttural whimper escaped her lips. Julian's brow furrowed, his tone growing even colder. "What are you standing there for? If you don't want to do it, there are plenty of others who would. You're the one who begged to stay by my side." The physical pain brought tears to Nina's eyes. Just as she was about to head to the bathroom to run the bath, Julian suddenly grabbed her, pressing her firmly against him. "Forget it. Don't run the water. Stay with me tonight." As he spoke, his lips moved toward hers. Nina's eyes fell on the distinct kiss mark on his chest. Her heart skipped a beat, then returned to its normal rhythm. She signed with her hands. "I'm on my period." Julian released her with a look of disgust, clearly annoyed. He went into the bathroom himself and slammed the door shut. Soon, the sound of Julian's laughter drifted from the bathroom. "Rosie, how about I take you to that exclusive restaurant tomorrow? You've gotten so thin since you came back. I also brought that bracelet you liked at the auction." Julian even started humming, his voice loud enough for her to hear clearly. Nina's face was a mask of indifference. She carefully tended to her wounds while pulling an old-fashioned watch from her pocket. Inside was a photo of her and her sister. It was from the happiest time of her life. "System, how much longer until the companion mission is over?" 30 days, 3 hours, and 58 minutes. A ripple disturbed the dead calm of Nina's heart. "Excellent." A video call rang through on her phone. It was Leo Jennings. "Nina Sterling, did you upset Rosie again?" She posted a story of herself drinking late at night. "You drove her to marry someone abroad, and now she's divorced." "You're a real jinx." Nina quickly shook her head, her hands flying into a flurry of signs. I didn't know, if you hadn't told me. Enough. Asking you is pointless anyway. You just keep your mouth shut, you filthy mute. Rosie is back. How dare you still occupy the position of Mrs. Blackwood? I'm ordering you to file for divorce from Julian immediately. Chapter 2. After hanging up, Nina saw Julian leaning against the doorframe in a bathrobe, his expression dark. You want a divorce? Who's the new man you're hooking up with? The man's large hand gripped Nina's chin. She tried to struggle, but he only held her tighter. Though I doubt you'd dare, you weren't even afraid of death just to stay by my side. So, Nina Sterling, why do you even like me? This time, it was Nina who fell silent. She couldn't possibly tell him that she didn't like him at all, that this was all just to complete her mission. After a long pause, she typed 4 words on her phone. Love at first sight. The man let out a derisive snort but said nothing more. When she woke up the next day, the man was long gone. Nina paid it no mind. She found her favorite journal and wrote down her 30-day countdown plan. Host, as you are nearing mission completion, the system will arrange for your death by cancer. Please endure. Nina went downstairs for breakfast, only to run into a furious Leo Jennings storming in. Nina Sterling, you've gotten bold, daring to hang up on me yesterday. I'm asking you, what will it take for you to leave Julian? Nina looked up at the man who was her biological brother in this world, a bitter taste rising in her throat. When she arrived in this world, she learned that her assigned role was that of the true heiress who had been switched at birth. And Rosalie was the fake who had stolen her identity for over a decade, basking in the family's adoration. To fulfill her mission, she had to get close to Julian while simultaneously letting the Jennings family know of her existence. After a simple DNA test, she was brought back to the Jennings family. But aside from her grandfather, no one welcomed her. She wasn't even allowed to use the Jennings surname. The family claimed she was an illegitimate daughter they had found. Unable to handle the shock, Rosalie had stormed off, gotten married abroad, and left. For some unknown reason, she had suddenly returned a few days ago. Nina didn't want to answer his question. She turned to leave, but Leo grabbed her wrist. If it weren't for you, would Rosie have married the wrong person and returned home heartbroken? Nina was already frail. Before she could steady herself, he shoved her hard, and she stumbled violently. She tumbled down several steps, landing on the platform below, and lost consciousness. When she woke up again, she was in a hospital room. Richard and Martha Jennings were there, and Leo stood off to the side, his face a mask of defiance. Mom, Dad, why should I have to kneel? It wasn't on purpose. I think this bitch Nina is just trying to get sympathy. That's enough, Richard snapped impatiently. Martha, standing beside him, looked like she wanted to say something but swallowed her words, glaring venomously at Nina instead. Leo is your brother. You're not seriously hurt. Let's just put this behind us. Everyone knew she was mute, so even as Nina's eyes welled with tears and she frantically signed, they pretended not to see. Nina looked at her leg, now in a cast, and a sharp pain shot through her heart. She had been an orphan in her previous life and had always longed for the warmth of a family. But the Jennings family couldn't care less about her. Leo, known for being obsessively protective of his sister, hated her for taking everything that should have been Rosalie's. But who had really taken what from whom? After they left, Nina began to stare blankly into space again. She was leaving soon. She had to deal with everything she owned in this world. Just then, the door opened, and Rosalie walked in. It had been nearly 7 years since they had last seen each other. Back then, Rosalie had impulsively married someone else, but the Jennings family needed to secure an alliance with the Blackwoods through marriage. So, the Jennings family had forced Nina to take her place. No one cared what she wanted. In fact, everyone thought it was a stroke of incredible luck for a mute like her to marry Julian Blackwood. Chapter 3. Nina, what happened to you? Leo told me you fell down the stairs. Rosalie sat right on Nina's injured leg, pressing down for good measure. I'm divorced now. Do you really think Julian, my dear, would still want you? Isn't it disgusting, using my face to please him? Rosalie tilted her head back, her smile radiant. Nina bit down hard on her lip, refusing to let a cry of pain escape. But then Rosalie suddenly slapped her own face. Nina, don't be angry. If you want to hit me to let off some steam, you can. Just please forgive my brother, he didn't mean it. Rosalie even started to cry, tears streaming down her face, a picture of pitiable beauty. The next moment, The door was kicked open, and Julian Blackwood strode in. He protectively gathered Rosalie into his arms, his icy gaze piercing straight through Nina. "How dare you hit Rosie? You're getting bold, aren't you? Nina Sterling, get on your knees and apologize to Rosie." Now, only then did Nina realize Rosalie's true intentions. She started to sign, then remembered Julian wouldn't bother to watch. Instead, she typed a line on her phone. "I didn't hit her. Really?" Beside them, Rosalie let out a small sob and buried her face in Julian's chest. Julian's expression darkened further, and he yanked the woman up from the hospital bed. "I'll count to 3. If you don't kneel, you'll never set foot in the Blackwood house again." The immense pain caused her to collapse to the floor. Even the slightest movement sent a sharp, stabbing pain from her bones. Nina lowered her gaze and, without hesitation, kowtowed. Julian's derisive laughter filled the air, while Rosalie's voice continued. "Julian, my dear, I believe my sister. She was just too angry. It's all my fault for coming back. I should have just stayed away forever." "Rosie, let's not talk about the past." They held each other tightly, looking for all the world like a deeply devoted couple. It was the system that finally couldn't take it anymore. "Host, you can ignore this. I can just pull up the surveillance footage from the room." "No, it's not necessary. Julian only believes what he sees." 29 days left. "It's almost over." Nina spent 3 days recovering in the hospital before Julian brought her home. The reason? Rosalie wanted to eat Nina's cooking. So Nina, still in a wheelchair, was sent back to the Blackwood estate, only to find Leo Jennings there as well. Well, the cast isn't even off and you're already thinking about cooking. You really do love being a maid, don't you?" Nina ignored him and tried to wheel herself away. But just then, Leo grabbed her by the hair. Her not-yet-healed leg hit the floor with a sickening thud. "I'm your brother, you see me, and you don't even say hello before trying to leave? You rude little wild brat." Leo's lips curled into a smirk, and his laughter grew louder. "You should just get lost sooner rather than later. Save yourself some face." "Oh, wait, you don't have any face left. Everyone knows you cling to Julian Blackwood like a lapdog, a mangy dog. They all laugh at how pathetic you are, and you're the biggest joke of all." Rosalie had appeared at some point and tugged on Leo's sleeve. "Brother, don't talk to Nina like that. Julian is such a wonderful man, it's normal for him to have admirers." Rosalie's face was a picture of shy modesty. She then turned to Nina. "Nina, I just got back and haven't found a place yet. Julian said I could stay at the Blackwood house." Nina nodded and, gripping the armrests of her wheelchair, managed to pull herself back up. Just then, Julian finally arrived. Seeing Nina's calm expression, he felt a strange, unsettling feeling. "Rosie will be staying here for a while. She's a bit of a picky eater, so you can start waking up at 5 every morning to make her breakfast." "Julian, my dear, won't that be too much trouble?" "Nina is still a patient." Julian immediately shook his head. "How could it be? She's always loved cooking. Making breakfast for Rosie is a blessing for her." Nina smiled and typed out a line. "It's no trouble." Chapter 4, Leo's face instantly lit up with a smug expression as he shoved a bag of groceries into Nina's lap. "Mute, what are you waiting for? Get to the kitchen. Do you want me to tell Julian you're slacking off again?" Nina looked at the groceries he'd bought. It was all seafood and meat, without a single vegetable. She sighed. She was allergic to seafood and didn't care for meat. It looked like she wouldn't be eating lunch today. But the thought that there were only 20-something days left gave her a sudden burst of motivation. Barely half an hour had passed before Rosalie came into the kitchen. "Nina, isn't the food ready yet? Is it that you don't want to cook for me?" She wouldn't dare. "Nina Sterling, hurry up, Rosie is hungry." Julian's angry voice rang out. Nina had no choice but to switch pots, reportioning the soup. Suddenly, Rosalie snatched the pot of hot broth from Nina's hands. Her body lurched, and the freshly boiled broth spilled all over Nina's back and arms. Ah, Nina's brow furrowed in pain as a harsh, grating sound struggled from her throat. The broth soaked through her clothes, leaving her in a wretched state. "Nina Sterling, are you all right? Someone, call the family doctor." Quickly, Julian moved to check her injuries, but then he heard Rosalie's cry. She pointed to a blister forming on the back of her hand, rubbing her eyes. "I'm so sorry, Nina. I was just trying to help. This blister really hurts." Leo had already rushed over, and he helped Rosalie up to leave. "Rosie, your skin is so delicate, we have to go now. What if it leaves a scar?" Without a moment's hesitation, Julian swept Rosalie into his arms and dashed out. Nina Sterling, go to the hospital yourself. We only have one family doctor, and Rosie's injury is more severe, so she needs to be seen first. The farce was over. Nina turned her wheelchair to look at the chaotic group in the living room and let out a low, bitter laugh. She gestured to a maid, asking for a set of thick clothes, but no one paid her any mind. A dozen maids were surrounding Rosalie, armed with various burn ointments. Resigned, Nina could only grit her teeth against the pain, find some clothes to throw on, and shakily hail a cab to the hospital. By the time she arrived, her clothes had stuck to her flesh. Even the burn unit doctor's brow furrowed into a deep crease. "Young lady, do you live alone? Why didn't you come to the hospital sooner? The skin and fabric are fused together. It's going to be very painful when I apply the ointment." Nina looked at the kind, matronly doctor before her, and her eyes began to sting. She didn't explain why she was late, simply pointing to her throat and shaking her head. She quickly typed out a line. "Doctor, I'm mute. Could you please just write down the instructions? Thank you." The doctor stared blankly for a moment, then sighed. "All right, you need to apply the ointment on time and keep the area dry." It was already dark when she returned to the Blackwood estate. Her body, wrapped in so much gauze, made her look both pitiful and comical. It was a young maid, Lucy, who couldn't bear to watch any longer and helped push Nina's wheelchair up the stairs. "Mrs. Blackwood is so pitiful, covered in injuries, and Mr. Blackwood is still having dinner with that Miss Jennings. What do you know? This one is full of tricks. She's been chasing Mr. Blackwood like a lapdog for years. She's just a stand-in for Miss Jennings. If you ask me, she deserves it. Who told her to take what isn't hers, clinging to him like a mangy dog?" The maid's chatter reached Nina's ears. She didn't care. She thanked the young maid, showing her the words she had typed. "Could you please come to my room after 9 to help me with my bandages? I can't reach." The maid was stunned for a moment, then blushed. She knew the mistress of the house had a good temper, but she hadn't expected her to be so gentle. The moment Nina entered the house, she saw the two at the dining table, feeding each other. "Here, Rosie, try this. Is it good?" Julian's gaze was so tender it seemed to drip with affection, and Rosalie's face was alight with a sweet smile. Nina felt a pang of confusion. Seeing them now, they clearly liked each other. Why hadn't Rosalie married Julian in the first place? The moment Rosalie saw Nina, she stood up nervously. "Nina, you're back." Nina nodded and was about to leave, but Julian suddenly felt awkward. He felt that this woman, Nina, had been very cold to him lately. "Are your wounds bandaged? Do you need me to apply the medicine for you?" Julian's patronizing tone struck Nina as strangely amusing. She took out her phone and typed a message. "No, thank you. You two enjoy your meal. I'm going to rest." Nina turned and left decisively, missing the dark expression that crossed Julian's face. It suddenly occurred to him. Could it be that Nina was angry and jealous? Chapter 5. At 9 o'clock, a knock sounded at the door right on time. Thinking it was the maid, Nina quickly got out of bed. But when she opened the door, it was Julian, holding gauze and ointment. "I know you're angry, but Rosie and I are just like brother and sister. There's nothing between us." Nina looked up into Julian's eyes and saw the flicker of guilt he couldn't hide. She began to sign her reply. "I believe you, but it's not necessary. I can do it myself." Nina tried to take the ointment, but the man wouldn't let go. Just then, a maid came running up, out of breath. "Miss Jennings fell in the bathroom. You have to go see her." "Sir?" Julian immediately dropped what he was holding and left without a second glance. Nina felt an unexpected pang of sorrow. In the past, whenever she got hurt, he would scold her while tending to her wounds. Now, he left without hesitation. Men were truly fickle, but she quickly dismissed the thought. No matter how good Julian was, she would be leaving sooner or later. Besides, he wasn't good to her at all. Lucy, the young maid, eventually came. The moment she saw Nina, she burst into tears. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Blackwood. Mr. Blackwood was so intimidating. He insisted on applying the medicine himself, so I had to give it to him." Nina shook her head, finding the girl to be both honest and kind. "It's all right, you can apply it now." The maid didn't stop crying until she saw the typed words on the screen, and then a small smile broke through. Julian didn't return to the room that night. Nina didn't care. She started to take stock of her belongings from over the years and found there wasn't much. Her clothes were mostly casual. She could only wear formal gowns and jewelry when Julian permitted. In the 9 years she had known Julian, every gift she had prepared for him had been carelessly tossed aside, likely gathering dust somewhere. Her gifts included wind chimes, a tie she had made, a custom-ordered ring, and the most expensive item, a watch that cost over $10,000. But even that had cost her an entire year's salary. Without support from the Jennings family and being unable to find much work due to being mute, her finances were tight. The one editing job she had managed to find, Julian had forced her to quit, calling it embarrassing. So she truly wasn't well off. But she was leaving this world soon, and she couldn't take any money with her anyway. So she packed up the gifts Julian had rejected and the clothes she no longer wore, preparing to send them to an orphanage. To better distribute the items, Nina took a taxi early the next morning. She didn't alert anyone, and when her phone died midway, she didn't pay it any mind. At the orphanage, the children swarmed around Nina the moment they saw her, greeting her in unison. "Nina, my sister, you're finally here, we missed you so much." Little heads gathered around her, peppering her with questions. A young boy named Sonny clung to her arm, whining playfully. "Nina, my sister, I learned all the basic signs in just half a month. The director said I'm really smart." Nina couldn't help but smile, and she began to sign back. "Sonny, that's amazing, you're so clever." In the afternoon, Nina took out the gifts one by one and let the children choose. Seeing their excited faces, she couldn't help but drift back to the past. She had been raised in an orphanage by an older girl named Violet Fairlight. Though they weren't related by blood to Nina, Violet had been both a mother and a sister. But such a good person had died 9 years ago in a chain reaction car crash. She was only 25, and she wouldn't have had to die. She had been rushing to the school after hearing Nina had fallen. At some point, tears were already streaming down Nina's face. She thought of her sister's blood-soaked body, and a sharp pain pierced her heart. The girl then touched the locket she wore, which held a picture of the still vibrant Violet, and a sense of softness washed over her. "Sister, just wait for me a little longer." At the strong urging of the director and the children, Nina chose to stay the night. It wasn't until she woke up the next day that she realized the time. She smiled, said her goodbyes to the children, and reluctantly got into a taxi. After finally managing to borrow the driver's portable charger to turn on her phone, she saw over 300 missed calls, more than 200 of which were from Julian. The next second, a call from Leo Jennings came through. "Finally decided to answer. I heard you ran away from home. Do you have any idea how worried Rosie is about you? And Julian has been looking for you everywhere. You're just playing hard to get, I'm telling you, even if you died, Julian would still only love Rosie. You're just a substitute. Don't you ever think you can climb over her?" Chapter 6, Nina scratched her head, feeling very confused. Julian had been coming and going at all hours these past few days. She had barely seen him. Why would he be looking for her? Nina didn't call back. Firstly, there was no need, and secondly, she was mute. It wasn't until she stepped into the Blackwood villa that Lucy, the young maid, was the first to run over. "Mrs. Blackwood, where have you been? You were gone for a whole day, and Mr. Blackwood was worried sick. He wouldn't eat this, wouldn't eat that, and he yelled at the chef all day. A few of the maids were even bad-mouthing you behind your back." Nina's eyes widened involuntarily. So, Julian was angry because the food wasn't to his liking. But what did that have to do with her? There were only 18 days left on the countdown. She didn't owe Julian anything. Lucy pushed Nina into the living room, where everything seemed calm. So she headed upstairs to her bedroom, only to find the curtains drawn shut. The room reeked of alcohol. Julian was lying asleep by the cabinet. Nina didn't want to disturb him, but it was too late. The next second, Julian tiredly opened his eyes, which were riddled with bloodshot veins. "Where did you go? And where are your things from the closet?" Nina jumped, quickly typing on her phone. "I went to the orphanage. I gave the clothes and some other things to the children there." Why the sudden urge to do that? Nina found it strange. She had been doing this for years, but Julian never cared about her, let alone what she did. She typed another line. "Just a whim." The man nodded, his hand tightening on Nina's chin. "Fine. But you can't just leave without a word next time. You're my wife, you have to listen to me." Nina could only nod, silently cursing Julian in her heart. "All right, go make me breakfast." A little of both Chinese and Western style, Nina decisively shook her head. Her arm still needed medicine, her whole body ached. Why did she have to listen to Julian? She wrote her excuse on her phone. My burns are quite severe. I can't get them wet. Julian's mind went blank for a moment, then he cleared his throat. Are you angry because I had the doctor see to Rosie's injuries first? She's been a crybaby since she was a child, spoiled and pampered. You're tough-skinned. No matter how bad it is, you'll heal quickly. Fine, I won't make you cook for Rosie. Don't get hung up on such trivial matters. You mope around like a sullen gourd all day. It's only because I'm a good person that I married you. Nina was so stunned by this speech that her entire worldview shattered. Julian always had a million excuses, and she hated people who made excuses the most. She nodded, then, without a backward glance, had Lucy help her prepare the guest room. She needed to rest. She needed to see her sister in the best possible state. Prompted by the system, she realized she needed to go to the hospital for a cancer checkup, just to leave behind evidence of her death from illness. Host, I have arranged a full-service lung cancer package for you. A dozen or so days will be sufficient to cause your death. Persistence is victory. She calmly held the late-stage lung cancer diagnosis and looked at the doctor. Seeing the patient nod to everything he said, the doctor found it a bit strange. It wasn't until Nina handed him her phone with the typed message that he realized the young girl was mute. Sigh, don't lose hope. Chemotherapy can give you a few more months. Where's your family? Nina typed a line. I don't have a family. I don't plan on getting treatment. Thank you. She left under the doctor's complicated gaze, only to run into Julian coming out of the obstetrics and gynecology department with Rosalie beside him, one hand on her stomach. Their eyes met, and the atmosphere instantly became awkward. Julian looked inexplicably flustered. Rosie's pregnant. Leo had something to do and couldn't come with her. Nina nodded, her gaze probing Julian's face. So the child was his. No wonder he was even accompanying her to the prenatal checkup. Julian felt a sense of relief. His gaze then fell on the diagnosis in Nina's hand, and his eyes narrowed. What are you doing at the hospital? Whose lung cancer diagnosis is that? Nina felt utterly bewildered. To prevent her plan from failing, she lowered her head and started typing. It's for the director of the orphanage. She hasn't been well, so I brought her for a checkup before. I just got the results today. Could you keep it a secret for me? I don't want her to worry. Looking at the girl's reddened eyes, Julian felt an inexplicable pang in his heart. He was overthinking things. Nina was perfectly healthy. 7 years ago, she had taken 3 stabs for him and survived alcohol poisoning. How could someone so young get cancer? Chapter 7, Rosalie shot Nina a resentful glare, then tugged on Julian's sleeve, her voice laced with tears. Julian, my dear, my stomach hurts. Julian's panic was visible. He swept Rosalie up in his arms and rushed her into the OB-GYN department. The system's voice urgently spoke in her mind. Host, why didn't you tell him you have cancer? I'm worried it will cause trouble and I won't be able to leave. Besides, I need to have my face restored before I go. Nina immediately booked an appointment with the plastic surgery clinic that had done her original procedure, explaining that she wanted to restore her original appearance. You finally came to your senses. I told you not to do it back then, but you wouldn't listen. Nina smiled and looked at the surgeon who had operated on her, Dr. Aaron Sawyer. She had intended to type, but Aaron stopped her. Just use sign language. I learned it a while ago. It's quite interesting. Nina's eyes lit up. She immediately used sign language to state her requirements: remove all implants, make the incisions small, and ensure a quick recovery. Aaron nodded, looking at the quiet Nina. He had known for over 7 years that Nina was the true heiress of the Jennings family, and later, Mrs. Blackwood. He'd heard it was Julian who made her get surgery to look like the fake Jennings heiress, and he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He had performed nearly 1,000 surgeries, but Nina was the only one who insisted on making herself look worse. He couldn't stop her then, but now it seemed she had finally woken up. Countdown, day 15. Nina arrived at the Blackwood estate to pack her things. Her surgery was tomorrow, and Aaron had said she would need to stay in the hospital for at least a week. She decisively packed her bags and found a lawyer to draft a divorce agreement. She had figured it out. Since she was going to see her sister, she needed to sever all the ties she hated in this world. Just as Nina was leaving with her suitcase, she ran into Julian. Where are you going? She handed Julian the prepared note she had drafted. "I'm going to the hospital to take care of the orphanage director. I want to stay with her for a week." Julian's first reaction was that Nina was still angry. He thought for a moment and pulled a bracelet from his pocket. It was clearly expensive. "This is a gift for you. Can you please not be angry anymore?" Nina frowned. This was the first time he had ever given her something in a pleading tone. Before, he would just toss things at her, sometimes even with an insult. Leo Jennings walked in at that moment, his mouth dropping open when he saw the bracelet. "Julian, I knew it. This is the bracelet you bought at the auction yesterday for $30 million, right? It's for Rosie, isn't it?" Rosalie walked in with a smile, looking shyly at Julian. Nina said nothing. Julian looked conflicted, but he still handed the bracelet to Rosalie. He didn't even dare to look at Nina, afraid to see an accusatory expression on her face. In truth, Nina didn't care. Julian was truly in love with Rosalie. The number of gifts he sent abroad each year was enough to fill a room. The gifts he gave her could be counted on one hand. The surgery was quick. Since she was under general anesthesia, Nina felt like she had just taken a nap when it was over. She saw her nose and chin covered in gauze, but it looked less frightening than when the implants had been in. However, her body was growing weaker, and the pain in her sternum was becoming unbearable. Her constant, round-the-clock coughing made Aaron sense that something was wrong. "Are you sick? Should I take you to the hospital for a checkup?" Nina looked at the man before her. In this world, he was one of the few people she considered a decent friend. She didn't use sign language, instead typing out a long message on her phone. "To be honest with you, I am sick. I'm begging you, on the day I die, please have my body cremated and scatter the ashes in the sea. I hate this world, but I have no choice but to be here." Aaron froze. He never imagined that the girl he hadn't seen in years was about to die. He still remembered the girl's beautiful face when she was 20. "All right, I promise you." Chapter 8, the next few days were happy ones for Nina. She didn't have to wait on Julian or listen to the maids bad-mouthing her. Her only issue was her deteriorating health. She started sleeping more and coughing up blood, but she was still happy because she would see her sister soon. When Aaron had free time, he would tell her stories, and Nina would share her own stories from the orphanage. They had pleasant conversations. Meanwhile, Rosalie would intermittently send Nina all sorts of intimate photos, from kisses and hugs to pictures of hotel beds and scattered clothes. "Did you know? Julian loves this child. He's going to divorce you soon. We'll see what you do then, Nina Sterling." In Rosalie's photos, Julian was gentle and considerate, a stark contrast to the man Nina knew. She decisively blocked Rosalie, her mind preoccupied with how to get Julian to sign the divorce papers. Countdown, day 5. Nina was finally discharged from the hospital. She gave Aaron the address of the crematorium she had contacted and made a final gesture of thanks with her hands. When she returned, the Blackwood staff was busy decorating the banquet hall. Only then did Nina realize it was Julian's birthday. In the living room, the two were holding up clothes, seemingly discussing something. When Nina walked in, the man's lips tightened. "What happened to your nose and chin? Are you hurt?" Nina shook her head and signed the familiar phrase. "I had the implants removed. I'll be back to my original appearance soon." Julian dug his nails into his palm. He felt that something was off with Nina. "Why did you suddenly want to change back? You were so desperate to look like Rosie that you borrowed money for the surgery." She let out a small scoff and began to sign. "I made myself ugly. Is there a problem with me wanting to be beautiful again?" Julian's face darkened, but he said nothing. Rosalie also felt uneasy. Nina had always acted as her stand-in. What was she planning by restoring her original face? "It's my birthday today. Go get dressed up and come out." Nina rolled her eyes, but the thought of the divorce agreement made her nod. That evening, a boisterous crowd quickly gathered. A group of young masters, led by Leo Jennings, arrived with Rosalie, drawing everyone's attention the moment they stepped into the banquet hall. "Look, it's the young master and miss of the Jennings family. Especially Rosalie, she's the one Mr. Blackwood treasures. I heard she moved into the Blackwood estate right after her divorce. Mr. Blackwood can't bear to be without her." "Exactly. And that Mrs. Blackwood, I hear she's a mute lapdog. Serves her right, being an illegitimate daughter. So pathetic. Look at her standing over there, probably crying her eyes out." A few of the young masters who were close friends with Julian snickered. Isn't that the truth? Everyone knows Julian loves Rosalie. They were even at the hospital together not long ago. Good news might be on the way. Amidst the crowd's laughter, Nina stood silently to the side, eating a small piece of cake. Seeing Nina in her usual downtrodden state, Leo and his friends surrounded her. Well, been a few days, and you've gone for more plastic surgery. Even if you were a goddess, Julian wouldn't like you. I told you to file for divorce, but you wouldn't listen. Are you happy making a fool of yourself now? Leo suddenly ripped the gauze off Nina's face. He froze. It was Nina's face from before the surgery. Why did you change back to your old face? Nina Sterling, you know, she was a great beauty before. The surgery made her proportions all weird. Mr. Blackwood missed out, but maybe we can give it a try. As the talk grew more explicit, Nina tried to leave, but one of the young masters pushed her into the 3-meter-high cake. A wave of panic rippled through the crowd. The force of the push was significant, and Nina started coughing violently again. Blood splattered onto the cake, blooming like lurid flowers. Chapter 9, when Julian arrived, he was met with the sight of a disheveled Nina and a pool of blood. Someone, get a doctor. Nina slowly climbed to her feet, shaking her head to indicate she didn't need one. She was covered in cream, and the sweet smell made her feel sick. Seeing her face as pale as a ghost, Julian was still worried and firmly grabbed her arm. But then he heard Leo's frantic cries for help. Someone, help my sister. I think she's having a miscarriage, call an ambulance. Julian looked conflicted, then let go of the girl's hand. You deal with this yourself. Rosie's situation is more serious. I have to go check on her. The man strode away, and the crowd dispersed, no one paying any mind to Nina, the mute. But then Aaron Sawyer walked over. How did the gauze come off? Should I take you to get it treated? Nina smiled and nodded. They were silent on the way. Finally, Aaron couldn't hold back any longer. Nina Sterling, I don't understand. Julian doesn't like you, so why do you stay by his side and take this abuse? Doesn't it hurt you? The girl lowered her gaze and wrote in Aaron's palm. It does, but I have to do this. I need to complete my mission. As the last 2 words were written, Aaron realized something. So she was forced to stay by Julian's side because someone had tasked her with it. Nina didn't explain further. She had already told Aaron more than enough. That night, Julian came home drunk. He explained that Rosalie had miscarried after drinking some juice at the party. Julian even said that if he found the person who had tampered with the juice, he would make them suffer 1,000 cuts. Nina just found it amusing. She showed Julian the words she had typed. The orphanage is hosting a charity gala and would like to invite you. It's okay if you don't go, as long as you sign. If you sign, I'll forgive you for what happened earlier. Julian blinked, then let out a low laugh. All right, as long as you forgive me. Nina, if I do anything wrong, will you forgive me too? Seeing that Julian was delaying signing, Nina could only grit her teeth and nod. The man quickly signed his name and held Nina tightly, refusing to let go. In truth, Nina hated being touched, especially by a reeking of alcohol Julian, but the thought of her sister made it bearable. Countdown, day 3. Nina burned all her clothes. Julian was at the hospital with Rosalie during her postpartum recovery. Countdown, day 2. Leo sent people to the house to question Nina, asking if she was the one who caused Rosalie's miscarriage. She denied it but was locked up by a hastily arriving Julian. Countdown, final day. Julian brought a maid as a witness to confront her. Why did you harm Rosalie? I wouldn't have divorced you even if she was pregnant. Nina Sterling, can't you tolerate Rosie and the child at all? Julian didn't even give Nina a chance to defend herself. In front of Rosalie, he had Nina tied up. Rosie, take out all your anger on her. Rosalie smiled sweetly and instructed the bodyguards to whip Nina again and again. Nina tried to sign, to explain, but no one cared. She began to cough up blood violently. The obstruction in her lungs made her feel like she was suffocating. Nina could only contact the system in her mind. Contact Aaron Sawyer for me. Don't let my body fall into Rosalie's or Julian's hands. The system complied. Already delirious, Nina watched the companion countdown tick down, second by second. With 5 minutes left, Aaron arrived. How did you let yourself get into this state? Nina smiled, struggling to sign. Thank you for coming to collect my body. If there's a chance in the next life, I'll repay you. On the way to the hospital, Nina saw the timer hit 0 and let out a sigh of relief. Her hand fell limply to her side. Aaron, holding her body, had tears welling in his red eyes. Julian was at work, but as he signed documents, he grew increasingly agitated. He never thought Nina would harm Rosie. Letting Rosie hit Nina was getting off easy. Just then, the landline at the villa rang. "Mr. Blackwood, you have to come back. A man took the unconscious Mrs. Blackwood away." Chapter 10, Julian slammed the accelerator to the floor, rushing home in a frenzy. He was greeted by a large, glaring stain of blood that had soaked into the floor. His brow furrowed tightly. He looked at the maids kneeling on the ground, trembling, and hurled an expensive vase to the floor, shattering it. "What's the use of hiring you all? You're all useless. You just stood by and watched Mrs. Blackwood get taken away." Rosalie was ecstatic on the inside that bitch Nina is finally gone, but on the outside, she put on a sorrowful expression. "Julian, my dear, don't work yourself up into a state. Maybe Nina planned to leave with someone else all along." Julian's head snapped toward Rosalie, his gaze so cold it was terrifying. Rosalie lowered her head, feeling guilty, but shot a look at one of the maids. A brave maid spoke up. "Sir, Miss Jennings is right. That man seemed very familiar with Mrs. Blackwood. Maybe the two of them have been for a while." Julian's brow tightened further. He shot the maid a look, and she immediately fell silent. In the surveillance room, Julian watched the screen. Nina, covered in blood, was lying on the ground, barely breathing. A sharp pain gripped his heart. He didn't understand. Was it so hard for Nina to just admit she was wrong? Did she have to be so stubborn, to end up covered in wounds just to prove a point? Then, he saw a man lift Nina into his arms, and Julian's fists clenched tighter. He recognized the man. It was the younger son of the Sawyer family, a famous plastic surgeon. He was the one who had done Nina's surgery. The more Julian thought about it, the angrier he got. He remembered Nina removing her implants not long ago. Who had done that surgery? Was it Aaron Sawyer again? Rosalie saw her chance and leaned against Julian. "Julian, my dear, you saw it yourself. Nina left with that man willingly. I'm sure she's fine. There's an auction tomorrow. Please, come with me. I've wanted that pink diamond centerpiece for so long." But Julian's thoughts were on Nina. In 7 years of marriage, Nina had never once asked him for a gift. It was laughable. His lapdog, Nina Sterling, had grown a backbone and dared to run off with another man. Julian's face grew darker. He didn't even hear what Rosalie was saying. He mumbled something about being busy, but Rosalie persisted, pressing closer. "Julian, my dear, are you angry with me? Do you blame me for hitting Nina too hard? But she caused me to lose my baby." Rosalie began to sob softly. Julian's heart skipped a beat. He felt a wave of unease, realizing he was letting Nina affect his emotions. "I know. I'm not angry with you, Rosie. I just think Nina has gotten too bold, daring to run away from home." Rosalie immediately soothed him in a soft voice. "I knew you wouldn't be mad at me, Julian, my dear. My sister is so childish, acting out like this at her age. Normally, he would have agreed with her, but he wasn't in the mood. Where could a heavily injured Nina have gone? The hospital, most likely. Maybe she'd come back on her own in a few days, or maybe he would condescend to go find her himself. It would be a kindness, after all. She was his wife." With that thought, Julian wrapped an arm around Rosalie and ordered his bodyguards to keep an eye on the city's hospitals. But Aaron Sawyer had already changed course, taking Nina's body to be cremated. He couldn't understand how the girl who had been smiling and joking with him just a short while ago during her surgery could now be a cold corpse. The thought of that scoundrel Julian made his heart ache. Perhaps this was a release. She would no longer have to suffer by Julian's side. He wiped a tear from the corner of his eye and carefully lifted Nina's body, treating her as if she were a fragile piece of glass. He even dismissed the crematorium's morticians and dressed Nina himself in a new set of clothes he'd had his assistant buy. After he had applied her makeup, Nina looked peaceful and serene in her eternal sleep, but Aaron's heart ached even more fiercely. After a long time, he made his decision. He handed Nina's body over to the professionals and watched with his own eyes as the girl was pushed into the furnace. On the screen, Nina's body was gradually sent deeper into the incinerator. Suddenly, the door to the control room was kicked open. Julian never expected his bodyguard to report, panting, that there was no sign of Nina and that Aaron Sawyer had gone to the crematorium. He had stormed in, intending to demand where Aaron had hidden Nina, but the face on the large screen made him panic. He tried to convince himself he was mistaken, but the face looked just like Nina's. Impossible. Impossible. Julian's body trembled, and he fainted. Chapter 11. Aaron Sawyer looked at the unconscious Julian on the floor and let out a derisive snort. As a well-known powerhouse in their circle, Julian had excelled in everything since childhood, the most outstanding of their generation. But after learning what he had done to Nina, Aaron's opinion had changed. A man who was a master strategist in the business world was, in his personal life, a fool who couldn't distinguish right from wrong, allowing others to bully his own wife. The cremation was soon complete. Aaron carefully collected the ashes. Suddenly, he didn't want to scatter Nina's ashes into the sea just yet. If he did that, she would truly have no connection to this world. He decided to hold a funeral for Nina. The news sent ripples through their entire social circle. Even his own parents came to ask about his relationship with Nina. After all, everyone knew Nina was the heiress of the Jennings family and Julian Blackwood's wife. By all rights, it should have been them organizing the funeral. Aaron explained Nina's suffering over the years to his parents and clarified that he and Nina were just friends. The elder Sawyers were finally relieved and stopped objecting, instead helping their son with the arrangements. Julian remained unconscious in the hospital for a day and a night. His assistant and bodyguards were frantic. If Mr. Blackwood didn't wake up soon, he would miss his wife's funeral, and they would surely be the ones to suffer the consequences. Meanwhile, Rosalie was busy making appearances at the hospital to show her concern, while also gossiping on the phone with her friends. What do you all know? This is just Nina putting on a show. But she forgot, how could she ever compare to me? Of course our Rosie is the one Mr. Blackwood cherishes. How could that filthy mute compare? But Rosie, are you going to the mute's funeral? Rosalie scoffed. Of course, you all come with me. I want to witness this mute's final act of drama. Julian, who had just opened his eyes, heard Rosalie's words, and an indescribable disappointment filled his heart. Rosalie claimed to be worried about Nina, but secretly, she wanted her dead. The thought made his head spin, and he lost consciousness again. In the Jennings family's living room, Martha Jennings watched as the phone rang off the hook, her face contorted with unstoppable resentment. That dead girl, did she really die? Even in death, she's causing us so much trouble. Richard Jennings emerged from his study, his face a picture of frustrated disappointment. You still have the nerve to talk? Wasn't it you who gave birth to that mute? She does nothing but bring shame to our family. Not at all like our sweet, sensible Rosie. Martha pouted, handing a peeled orange to Leo who was sitting beside her. Son, look at your father. Leo was indifferent, his eyes glued to his game. If you ask me, Mom, Dad, you're worrying for nothing. Rosie said it herself, the mute was just beaten up. How could she be dead? Besides, that mute is tough as nails. When has she ever not bounced back? Richard and Martha nodded in agreement, making a snap decision. They would go to the funeral tomorrow and see for themselves whether Nina was dead or not. Elsewhere, Nina woke up in her bedroom. She was greeted by the familiar, refreshing green decor, a far cry from the cold, black and white color scheme of the Blackwood estate. She checked the time on her phone and realized that only 9 hours had passed since before her transmigration. The 9 years by Julian's side felt like a dream, an incredibly oppressive one. Fortunately, it was all over. An image of Aaron Sawyer's tear-streaked face in the ambulance flashed through Nina's mind. She froze for a rare moment. She had indeed troubled him. Suddenly, her phone rang. Miss Sterling, your sister is awake. Please come to the hospital right away. Chapter 12. The moment she saw Violet Fairlight again, Nina's eyes filled with tears. The system hadn't lied. Her sister was truly awake. Violet smiled faintly, affectionately calling out, Nina. Nina could no longer hold back her tears and tightly embraced the sister she hadn't seen in 9 years. The doctors and nurses nearby, witnessing this scene of sisterly love, couldn't help but marvel at this medical miracle. Violet took Nina's hand, carefully studying her younger sister's face. Nina, you must have suffered while I was in a coma. Not at all, sister. You were only unconscious for about half a month. But Violet smiled bitterly. Nina, did you know? I was in a coma, but it felt like I was seeing another world. In that world, there was a girl who looked exactly like you, but she couldn't speak. She was bullied by so many bad people, and even in her final moments, she was beaten to a pulp. But I couldn't do anything. My intuition told me that she was you, Nina, my foolish little sister. All of Nina's pent-up grievances burst forth like a broken dam. She threw herself into Violet's arms and cried her heart out. "Sister, if you hadn't been trying to save me, you wouldn't have been in that car accident. This was the only thing I could do for you. You're the only family I have." They held each other even tighter. This time, no one could ever separate them again. Meanwhile, Julian remained unconscious for 2 days, only waking up again near midnight. His throat burned as if it were on fire. Outside the door, the bodyguards were sound asleep, their snores echoing in the hallway. Furious, the man swept everything off the table. He lost his balance and fell to the floor, a pathetic sight. Back on the hospital bed, Julian glared impatiently at the row of bodyguards, demanding to know why Nina wasn't by his side. How could the bodyguards dare to tell the truth? They all stammered and stuttered. Facing Julian's murderous gaze, his assistant, Dexter, handed him a scheduled email he had received 2 hours prior. The document's cover read, "Divorce Agreement," in large letters. Nina's name was already signed, dated more than 10 days ago. The atmosphere in the room was incredibly tense. Julian looked at Nina's familiar signature and, strangely, burst out laughing. The others in the room exchanged glances, shaking their heads in helplessness. They watched as the man violently smashed the tablet on the floor and pointed at it, cursing Nina. "Nina Sterling, you've gotten bold, you've learned to be lazy, not even coming to see me. And now you want me to sign divorce papers. In your dreams, all of you, go find her. I don't care if you have to tear this city apart, bring my wife to me," but not a single person moved. Julian's face grew even darker. Since when did even his bodyguards dare to disobey him? Dexter spoke up weakly. "Mr. Blackwood, Mrs. Blackwood, she's already been cremated. You saw it with your own eyes. Please don't make things difficult for us." Dexter felt a shadow fall over him. He looked up just in time to meet Julian's fist, a searing pain exploding on his cheek. Even so, for the sake of his year-end bonus, he clung to the man's leg. "Mr. Blackwood, you have to snap out of it. Mrs. Blackwood is really not coming back. Tomorrow is her funeral." Julian felt like a kite with its string cut, collapsing to the floor. At that moment, his mind was filled with the image of the face on the control room screen. That lifeless face, devoid of any joy or anger, was that Nina? No, it couldn't be her. She loved him so much. How could she bear to leave him? Julian then thought of Aaron Sawyer's repeated appearances. It must have been Aaron pulling the strings. Perhaps Nina was just throwing a tantrum, so she conspired with Aaron to put on the show just to make him jealous. At this thought, a confident smile appeared on the man's face. Chapter 13. The next day, Julian made a special trip back to the Blackwood estate to change into a black suit. A smile played on his lips, but it held a sinister, unsettling quality. When Julian and his entourage arrived, the funeral home was already crowded. Most people were there for the drama. When Rosalie saw Julian, a look of pleasant surprise flashed in her eyes. She unabashedly linked her arm with his. "Julian, my dear, are you all right? I heard from your secretary that you were unconscious." Julian immediately pulled his arm away. He was here to bring Nina home today. If she saw this, she might get jealous and throw another fit. Rosalie felt a pang of embarrassment but was reluctant to let go. Julian, however, walked over to Aaron Sawyer, who was standing by the memorial portrait. Using his height advantage, he grabbed Aaron by the collar. "Where's Nina Sterling? Tell her to come out and go home with me right now." Aaron's parents, stunned, moved to intervene, but the man completely ignored them. With a gesture, he was about to have his bodyguards forcibly remove Aaron. Aaron broke free from the bodyguard's grasp and said calmly, "Mr. Blackwood, if you're still not clear-headed, perhaps you should go wash your face. Look closely. This is your wife's funeral. How could I possibly conjure a living person out of thin air for you? I need to see her, dead or alive. Besides, she's my wife. What right do you, an outsider, have to dictate things?" The two men were at a standoff. Rosalie quickly shot Leo Jennings a look. Leo, in front of everyone, declared loudly, "If you ask me, that mute Nina isn't dead at all. As the saying goes, mutes live long lives. This is all just a show put on by this Sawyer guy and that mute, just to embarrass our Jennings family and Mr. Blackwood." Murmurs rippled through the crowd, all sorts of nasty words being thrown at Nina's name. Julian's eyes narrowed in displeasure. Could it really be as his brother-in-law Leo said? In that case, Nina was being far too willful. Aaron's anger flared. He looked at the smug Leo across from him and threw a punch. Are you even human? Your own sister is dead, and you're saying she's putting on a show. Does your Jennings family have any conscience? The scene descended into chaos. Aaron's punches were relentless, leaving Leo's face a mess of purple and blue. Julian put a stop to the fight, ordering his bodyguards to pull Aaron away and forcibly suppress the strange feeling in his heart. Since you say Nina Sterling is dead, where are her body and ashes? Without them, how can I believe you? Aaron laughed even louder, hiding the fact that he still had the ashes. Has Mr. Blackwood forgotten how he fainted? Hasn't Mr. Blackwood received any documents in his email? Whether your wife is truly dead or just faking it, you know the answer in your own heart. The man's mind flashed back to the face he had seen at the crematorium, and an uncontrollable pain gripped his heart. He told himself that Nina was just angry, that she had designed this funeral just to make him coax her in public. But she still hadn't shown up, and Aaron kept insisting she was dead. Should he believe it? He didn't know why Nina hadn't appeared yet. He had already lowered himself to come find her. What more did she want? The little mute had loved him to the bone, doing almost everything she could to please him. She always loved to cook a huge spread of dishes and personally sewed gifts for him. She knew about his stomach problems and always made sure he ate on time, never even refusing his advances. Julian was actually very proud of this. He never expected this little mute to care so much about him, yet sometimes she seemed completely indifferent. She never questioned the scent of another woman's perfume on him. When he came home late at night, she never asked for a reason. Unconsciously, tears had begun to stream down Julian's face. It seemed he had really made a mistake. The little mute was unwilling to come back and see him. Chapter 14. It wasn't until his phone rang again that Julian hastily unlocked it. He thought it was a message from Nina, but when he opened it, he saw hundreds of videos showing Nina being bullied by the Jennings family. The clearest one was the scene in the hospital room where Rosalie deliberately slapped her own face. Julian was utterly panicked. Rosalie had grown up with him, she was gentle and kind. But this clear photo and video told him that was not the case. It can't be, it can't be. Julian, trembling, called his assistant. Get someone here. I want these videos and photos authenticated right in front of me. Don't let anyone else know. A few hours later, Julian, his face dark, flipped through the report confirming the authenticity of the evidence. He randomly pressed play on a video, and Rosalie's voice, broken and intermittent, came through. You'll only ever be a substitute. Julian, my dear, is madly in love with me. How dare you, a mute, stay by his side? Julian could no longer contain the rage burning in his chest and threw the phone to the ground. He couldn't believe the woman he had once liked had such a hypocritical side, capable of saying such hurtful things. And what about Nina, that little mute? When she heard those words, she must have been devastated. Go, invite the 4 members of the Jennings family over. Say I'm treating them to dinner. Listen up, the moment they step into the Blackwood estate, take everyone except Rosalie to the basement. When the 4 members of the Jennings family heard Julian was inviting them to dinner, they were ecstatic. Martha, in particular, was so excited she wanted to wear her most valuable jewelry to the banquet. However, there were fewer maids to greet Rosalie today than usual. She didn't think much of it and asked the assistant, "Where's Julian, my dear? Why didn't he come to the door to greet us?" The next second, the assistant winked, a smile that didn't reach his eyes on his face. A group of black-clad bodyguards surrounded the 3 Jennings family members. As for Rosalie, she was already so scared her body went limp. As the blinding overhead light in the basement switched on, Julian finally spoke in a low voice. "Do you know where Nina Sterling went?" Leo was the first to speak up. "Julian Blackwood, what are you doing? That mute Nina has legs. How should I know where she ran off to? Let me go. Is this how you treat your brother-in-law?" Julian glanced at Leo's arrogant expression. The thought of him shouting at Nina with that same attitude more than once made him inexplicably furious. Julian snatched the electric baton from his assistant's hand and kicked Leo. "Who gave you permission to speak to me like that? You don't deserve to be my brother-in-law." The electric baton came down hard. Leo couldn't help but scream in pain, his body trembling uncontrollably. He soon passed out. Rosalie was already scared out of her wits. She cautiously crawled to Julian's leg, her face streaked with tears, looking pitiful and helpless. "Julian, my dear, In the past, Julian would have been overcome with pity. But after seeing Rosalie bully and frame the little mute, he admitted his heart ached even more than before. "Rosalie, how did you change so much? Even if Nina was at fault, why did you have to frame her? You weren't like this before," Rosalie stammered, trying to defend herself, but didn't know how to start. "Julian, my dear, I just love you too much. I get upset just seeing Nina. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry." The man looked down at the clothes Rosalie was clutching and yanked her hand away. He was certain he was disgusted with Rosalie and had no desire to hear her excuses. Only then would the little mute be able to forgive him when she came back. Chapter 15, Julian then tossed the phone with the videos and photos in front of Richard and Martha Jennings. Martha's face turned a variety of colors. "Mr. Blackwood, Nina is our child. We couldn't love her enough. How could we possibly bully her?" Richard also gave a sycophantic smile and denied it. When Nina came to the Jennings family, she was withdrawn. "What you saw was probably her being punished for doing something wrong. We are Nina's biological parents. How could we harm her? These photos are all fake." "Julian, my boy, you shouldn't have tied us up." For Nina's sake, Julian let out a derisive laugh. How had he never noticed before how shameless the Jennings family was? Still talking back. "You don't deserve to be Nina Sterling's parents." It wasn't until the clear surveillance footage, including the entire video of Leo beating Nina, was played that the three of them went limp. Seeing their weak and pathetic state, Julian felt a surge of anger. The little mute was just too soft-hearted. She never even complained when she was bullied. He paused for a moment. Nina didn't tell him about these things, even pretending that everything was fine. Was it because she also believed he wouldn't help her? Give them a good lesson, especially Leo Jennings. A sharp pain shot through the man's chest. In the end, he had to be supported by his assistant to slowly walk out of the basement. He was filled with rage, smashing everything in the room. Unconsciously, his body was covered in scratches and his shirt was stained with blood, but Julian didn't feel any pain. It wasn't until his assistant reported on the condition of the 4 Jennings family members that he found the unconscious man. "Mr. Blackwood, you have to take care of yourself. If Mrs. Blackwood found out, she would be so sad." The assistant pleaded earnestly, but Julian didn't want to listen. He missed the little mute. He wanted her back by his side, no matter the cost. After being hospitalized, Julian often couldn't sleep and started taking sleeping pills. The first night, he dreamed of Nina. The girl was in a school uniform, chatting and laughing with her classmates, but the dream ended quickly, and the man woke up in a cold sweat. The next day, he took the sleeping pills on schedule, and sure enough, he saw Nina again, sitting in her room painting, her smile radiant. But the dreams became shorter and shorter. Julian gradually realized what was happening and began to recklessly increase the dosage again and again, even forcing himself to sleep. As a result, he was asleep for 20 hours a day. Soon, the assistant and doctors noticed something was wrong. They were shocked by the man's madness, sighed, and had no choice but to pump his stomach to save him. When he finally woke from the dream, Julian's eyes were vacant, and his heart felt empty. The doctor refused to prescribe any more sleeping pills. He could no longer dream of the little mute. Nina also sensed that something was wrong. Since her sister woke up, she had been acting as she always had, but she constantly felt like she was being watched. Yet, when she turned around, there was no one there. Not only that, but she had been getting frequent headaches in class recently. The worst time, she fainted right in the middle of a lecture. Her sister, Violet, was so scared she rushed to the school. They did every possible test, but couldn't find anything wrong. But Nina's condition worsened. She could feel a pull from deep within her soul, as if someone was looking for her. When the thought popped into her head, she was startled. The first person she thought of was Julian. Could it be related to him? Soon after, during an afternoon nap, she saw the system again. Due to detecting Julian Blackwood's intense longing for the host, which is affecting the host's spiritual stability, it is recommended that you return to Julian Blackwood's side. Otherwise, your body will suffer irreversible damage. And if I don't go back, then you will likely fall ill and even die in the near future. Because you have spent too much time by Julian Blackwood's side, this system is also powerless to help. Hearing this outcome, Nina felt a sense of helplessness. I can go back, but you didn't tell me about these side effects before. I want to return with my sister Violet under a new identity, and I can't be mute anymore. The system nodded, giving Nina 3 days to prepare. The two quickly packed their bags, said their goodbyes to their friends under the pretext of going abroad, and entered the space-time tunnel together. Chapter 16, unable to dream of Nina Sterling any longer, Julian Blackwood panicked. He consulted countless psychological experts, but to no avail. One fearless doctor even suspected Julian might be mentally unstable and insisted on examining him. But Julian knew he wasn't sick. He just missed his little mute. Night after night, the intangible pain kept his nerves stretched taut. In the basement, one of Leo Jennings's arms was gone. He lay on the floor, half dead. Richard and Martha Jennings huddled together, silent. When Rosalie Jennings saw Julian arrive, she ran over to him. Julian felt he had been merciful with Rosalie. After all, he hadn't tortured her, just locked her up with her family. "Julian, my dear, I was wrong. I shouldn't have bullied Nina Sterling, but I just love you too much. Our child was taken from us by Nina. Julian, my dear, just let me go. I'll never do it again." Julian rubbed his aching forehead and looked at Rosalie's flat stomach. This was a mistake he had made in a drunken stupor. He couldn't even understand why he and Nina had never conceived in 9 years together, yet one time with Rosalie had resulted in a pregnancy. He then remembered the day he had accompanied Rosalie for her checkup and the lung cancer diagnosis in the little mute's hand. In an instant, a metallic taste filled the man's throat. So she had been sick even then, but had hidden it from him. Julian clenched his fists, yet a part of him was glad the child was gone. He glanced coldly at Rosalie, raising his hand, but ultimately letting it fall. "Someone get Miss Jennings out of here. She is forbidden from entering the Blackwood estate from now on." "I have my own plans for the other 3, Rosalie tried to say more, but was restrained by the bodyguards. The 3 remaining Jennings family members begged for mercy. The next moment, his assistant, Dexter, rushed in anxiously. "Mr. Blackwood, Miss Rosalie Jennings's ex-husband is here. He says the child Miss Jennings miscarried was not yours." Julian froze for a moment, then strode into the living room to see a blond, blue-eyed man. "Mr. Blackwood, I am Rosalie's ex-husband, Wyatt. To be frank, our divorce proceedings were not yet finalized when she ran back to this country, pregnant." Wyatt pulled out a pregnancy test report. It clearly stated a 3-month pregnancy. Julian remembered that Rosalie had returned 2 months ago. There was no way this child could be his. Rosalie bribed the doctors and nurses to falsify the records. "She took a significant portion of my assets. I'm telling you this only so you can help me." Julian's knuckles turned white with rage. He had known Rosalie's character was flawed, but to stoop so low as to try and make him raise another man's child, what else was she capable of? After Wyatt left, Dexter presented Julian with the doctor's confession and the authentication results. Julian felt the blood rush to his head. "Where's Rosalie? Get her out here. I want to question her." A nearby maid, pouring water, watched in fear as the pale-faced Rosalie was brought out by bodyguards. "I'm asking you, whose child did you miscarry?" "Yours, of course, Julian, my dear." In the next instant, Julian could no longer control his inner rage and slapped Rosalie across the face. "I gave you a chance, still won't admit it. Rosalie, why did you lie to me? Was I not good to you?" Rosalie felt a searing pain on her cheek. When she saw the pregnancy report on the floor, she panicked and fell to her knees, begging for mercy. The maid, seeing Rosalie in this state, instantly understood that she had fallen from Mr. Blackwood's favor. After weighing the pros and cons, she decisively knelt down. "Mr. Blackwood, I have something to say. Miss Jennings's miscarriage was something she staged herself, just to frame Mrs. Blackwood. I have proof." Chapter 17, the maid hurriedly produced her messaging, app chat history, and transaction records. Julian's body went cold as he scrolled through the messages. It was all reports from the maid to Rosalie about his whereabouts. The most recent one was a voice message from Rosalie, instructing her to firmly place the blame on Nina. So the little mute had been framed, and he had personally handed her over to Rosalie for punishment. A sharp, twisting pain seized Julian's chest, and sweat beaded on his forehead. The other maids, seeing their boss in this state, understood what was happening. "Sir, Miss Jennings was so cruel that day. She insisted on dipping the whip in chilly water to beat Mrs. Blackwood. When she passed out, Miss Jennings would just splash water on her to wake her up. Sir, it was Miss Jennings who threatened us not to say anything. Hearing this, Rosalie's eyes widened. She crawled crying toward the man, only to be kicked away. "Julian, my dear, I can explain, Julian, my dear." Julian immediately ordered someone to gag Rosalie, not wanting to hear another word of her deceitful pleas. Only now did he fully grasp Rosalie's true nature. She had bullied his little mute, tried to make him raise another man's child, and framed the little mute. The weight of it all sent Julian's mind into a chaotic spiral. He had been played for a fool by Rosalie, and had even helped her bully the little mute. Julian even thought that if he had known what kind of person Rosalie was earlier, maybe the little mute wouldn't have been hurt, wouldn't have died. Torture Rosalie well, and fire all these maids. The vast villa fell silent once more, but the pain in the man's body cut deep into his bones. Julian remembered the times he had questioned the little mute, how she had frantically tried to sign her explanations. The memory was now a bitter irony. He hadn't trusted her, hadn't even given her a chance to explain, and had convicted her based on his own assumptions. His mind replayed his actions over the past 9 years. He would be happy when the little mute coaxed him, angry when she went out with other men, and proud when she received a gift he had casually given her. Even when she restored her original appearance, Julian had felt more joy than anything else. The little mute was more beautiful than before, more eye-catching. What he felt more than anything was a sense of insecurity. Julian looked at the blood on his palm and let out a humorless laugh. So, he had unknowingly fallen in love with Nina Sterling. But he was only realizing it now. How ridiculous. The little mute was gone, and he, her incompetent husband, couldn't even find her body or her ashes. She must have hated him so much, Julian didn't know how he left the Blackwood estate. His thoughts were a mess. One moment he was laughing, the next he was crying. He went to his usual private room at the bar and ordered dozens of glasses of strong liquor. The harsh alcohol burned his stomach. He coughed repeatedly, his face pale as paper, and he couldn't stop dry heaving. He missed the little mute, but he couldn't see her. He could only use alcohol to numb the pain that racked his body. Julian looked at his pathetic reflection in the mirror and could only laugh bitterly. If only the little mute were here. He wanted to hold her and apologize, to tell her he loved her, that he was willing to repent, to kneel and beg for forgiveness. If only the little mute would come back. Julian was drunk and dizzy, his head throbbing. In his peripheral vision, he caught a glimpse of a figure passing his room. From the back, it was an 80 match for the little mute. The man's breath hitched. Ignoring his numb legs, he stumbled out of the room and saw the familiar profile at the entrance of a distant private room. The little mute had almond-shaped eyes and a small, delicate nose. Her neck was long and slender. You could pick her out of a crowd at a glance. Nina Sterling. Julian cried out the name impatiently. The woman in the distance flinched and looked over. Chapter 18. Although the woman was wearing heavy makeup, Julian was certain it was Nina Sterling. His intuition told him his little mute wasn't dead. He strode forward, intending to stop the woman, but was forcefully pushed back by the surrounding bodyguards. "Who do you think you are? Our CEO is here for a business meeting. You drunk, get lost? Take another step and I won't be so polite. Plenty of people are after our CEO. If you want to hit on her, at least clean yourself up." Julian looked down at his 2-day-old suit, stained with dried alcohol and reeking of a sour smell. His expression instantly soured. The memory of his recent drunken binge made him feel a pang of shame. Nina glanced at the man with flushed cheeks and a wrinkled suit, feeling a touch of surprise herself. Julian had always been a neat freak and didn't have a habit of binge drinking. How had he ended up in such a sorry state? She admitted that when she heard the name of the deceased, she had indeed panicked. But so what? Her new identity was that of a major corporation's heiress. Julian couldn't touch her, nor could he help Rosalie bully her. "Deal with him. I don't know this random person." Nina waved her hand dismissively and walked straight into the private room. When Julian heard the woman speak, he froze. Nina was mute. It was impossible for her to suddenly be able to talk. Had he mistaken her for someone else? Julian then thought of the face on the large screen at the crematorium, and a sharp pain in his chest made him double over. "Didn't you hear me?" Get lost, seeing that Julian still wasn't leaving, the 2 bodyguards exchanged a look and threw a punch at his face. He fell to the ground, the stinging pain on his face sobering him up. He felt a wave of frustration, partly because he hadn't brought his own bodyguards, and partly because this woman who looked so much like Nina wasn't mute. But he knew very well how happy he had felt upon seeing her. Julian had no choice but to return to his private room and think things through. He replayed the woman's movements and tone of voice over and over in his mind. He suddenly remembered that when she had instructed her bodyguards, she had subconsciously rubbed her nails a few times. Nina had the same habit. Every time she was about to sign, she would first rub her nails. Was it a coincidence? Julian didn't believe it. He immediately called his assistant, Dexter. Check if a prominent young lady with the surname Fairlight has recently arrived in H City. Pay special attention to her appearance. I want her complete file. After changing into a fresh suit, Julian moved a chair and sat by the door of her private room. The two bodyguards had been thinking about teaching the meddling man a lesson, but the bar manager stopped them. That's Julian Blackwood, the head of the Blackwood family in H City. You outsiders better not lay a hand on him, or you'll be in for a world of trouble. The two bodyguards froze. Remembering they had just punched this Mr. Blackwood, they felt a wave of apprehension. The man had no intention of punishing them. They were following their CEO's orders, and that CEO was very likely the little mute. He could understand her being angry upon seeing him again. An hour later, Dexter cautiously delivered the file, steeling himself to read it aloud. Serene Fairlight, 27 years old, heiress to the Centurion Group, just returned to the country. She has an older sister named Violet Fairlight, who is in poor health. She has returned this time because Centurion Group is investing in a project in H City, and Miss Fairlight has been sent to oversee the branch office. Julian impatiently flipped through the unfamiliar file. The several pages of introduction all painted Serene Fairlight as a career-driven woman. Besides looking like the little mute, the two had nothing in common. He angrily tossed the file aside, just as the door to the private room opened. Chapter 19. Serene Fairlight tilted her chin, a half-smile playing on her lips. Mr. Blackwood, a pleasure to finally meet you, but you really didn't need to investigate me right in front of my bodyguards. Julian felt his face flush. The woman's voice was gentle, unlike the whimpering sounds his little mute used to make. The man's heart trembled, but he held on to a sliver of hope. Nina, can we stop this? I was wrong before. Let's go home. Don't worry, Mr. Blackwood, I don't know any Nina you're talking about. You should know that I am Serene Fairlight. While you may be a big shot in H City, I'm not afraid of you. Move. The surrounding bodyguards gasped. They never expected the Fairlight heiress to dare speak to Mr. Blackwood like that. But when they saw the woman's face, which was almost identical to the late Mrs. Blackwood's, it no longer seemed so surprising. Julian's gaze, however, refused to back down. You can deny it if you want, Miss Fairlight, but why is your habit of rubbing your nails the same as my wife's? Is that also a coincidence? Serene's heart skipped a beat, but her face showed only a derisive laugh. Mr. Blackwood, you're making a big deal out of a small, unconscious gesture of mine. How ridiculous! He fixed his gaze on every inch of Serene's face, trying to find a flaw, but found nothing. Could it really just be a resemblance or a coincidence? Julian thought all night, but he couldn't control his urge to investigate. He drove to the Fairlight residence. Nina, we met yesterday, so we can be considered friends. How about we have breakfast together? Serene looked at the man's sycophantic smile, and her mind flashed back to when she, as Nina Sterling, had begged him to eat breakfast. A sharp pain gripped her heart. No, thank you, Mr. Blackwood. We've only met once at best. I heard your wife passed away. I can understand your grief, but you can't just pounce on anyone who looks similar. Julian's heart, once filled with joy, was instantly doused with cold water. Nina, is that what you think of me? I wouldn't mistake you for someone else. Enough, Serene covered her ears. Since arriving in this world, she had wanted nothing to do with Julian. She had a new identity, a family. The past 9 years were just a mission to her. Now that Nina Sterling was long dead, Julian's refusal to let go was simply absurd. If you keep this up, don't blame me for calling the police. Serene pushed his restraining hand away, her long, narrow eyes filled with disgust. The man's heart felt as if it had been pierced by 1,000 needles. The little mute had never looked at him with such a disgusted expression. She would only gaze at him steadily, her eyes filled with an endless sea of love. A breeze blew past. Serene's figure had already disappeared into the distance, but Julian remained frozen for a long time. If the resemblance was a coincidence, then why did the feeling she gave him feel so familiar? After much thought, he decided to find a way to test Serene. The first thing Julian remembered was that the little mute had been burned and must have a scar. So, he deliberately arranged for someone to spill coffee on Serene. "Miss Fairlight, my apologies. Let me buy you a new outfit." Serene, who was in a hurry to inspect a mall, was even more annoyed. She took the clothes from the sales associate and went straight to the fitting room to change, completely oblivious to the look in the female associate's eyes in the shadows. "Mr. Blackwood, Miss Fairlight does indeed have a scar on her back." A wave of joy surged through Julian's heart. He watched the person emerge from the fitting room, his excitement palpable. "Nina, even if you don't admit it, you have a scar on your back." "My wife had one too." "You are her, aren't you?" Serene was initially confused, but upon hearing the flaw the man had found, she was a little surprised. However, she had no intention of admitting it now. "What? Does Mr. Blackwood have a penchant for peeping? My scar is from a family punishment. If you don't believe me, you can ask anyone in the Fairlight family." Chapter 20. Serene even helpfully pulled down the collar of her shirt to show the man. "Take a look. Does my scar look like your wife's?" Julian immediately looked up. What he saw was a long, pale pink whip mark, nothing like a large area burn. The man's heart instantly sank. He stared at the woman who looked so much like his little mute, yet wasn't. Serene unceremoniously pushed the man aside, a flicker of relief in her heart. Thankfully, she had removed all her body scars when she first arrived in this world. The family punishment had been administered before she returned to the country. Meanwhile, Julian was caught in a spiral of self-doubt. He considered the possibility that the little mute had used some special method to cover it up. So, remembering that the little mute was allergic to pollen, he began to send flowers with great fanfare. Several huge bouquets of roses filled the reception area of Fairlight Corporation, the air thick with their intoxicating fragrance. When Serene saw the flowers, she thought Julian was stubbornly pursuing her. But after a sudden sneeze, she realized Julian was using the flowers to test her for allergies. Although she did her best to avoid them, her neck and elbows still began to turn red and break out in a rash. Just as she was swallowing an anti-allergy pill, Julian burst into her office, ignoring the security guard's attempts to stop him. The man's face was filled with relief when he saw the red spots on Serene's hands. "You are the little mute, aren't you?" Nina was also allergic to pollen. Serene smiled and shook her head, tilting her head back to reveal her long neck, which was covered in red marks and conspicuous welts. "The red spots on my hands are from mosquitoes last night. I went camping and on a date after all. It's normal to have some marks." The man's brow furrowed in disbelief. He reacted, thinking how could it be such a coincidence? But when he heard his assistant's report on Serene's schedule, he was at a loss. He knew the red marks on her neck couldn't possibly be from an allergic reaction. The thought of her with some other man sent an uncontrollable pang of pain through Julian's heart. "Mr. Blackwood, are you not leaving yet? This is Fairlight Corp. You can't just barge into the CEO's office." Such fine manners. The man looked into those highly sarcastic eyes and instantly felt as if a bucket of cold water had been poured over him. Soon, everyone in the elite circles knew that Julian Blackwood was madly pursuing Serene Fairlight. What was even more bizarre was that this Serene looked almost identical to Julian's deceased wife. Many people, remembering that Nina Sterling was just a substitute for Julian's first love, instantly found it plausible. Some gossip reporters even commented on Julian's unchanging aesthetic over the years. His assistant, Dexter, also thought Julian was caught in a cycle of finding replacements and, after much hesitation, finally spoke up. "Sir, Mrs. Blackwood has passed away. It's no use finding 100 lookalikes." "Shut up." Julian's face was ashen as he threw the tablet in his hand. Was he really that desperate? Or was he the only one who believed Serene was the little mute? After a long pause, he looked at his assistant with a complicated expression. "Do you think Serene and my wife look alike?" "Of course they do, but they also don't. Mr. Blackwood, there are many people in the world who look alike, but Miss Fairlight and your wife have completely different auras. Even if they look similar, you shouldn't be mistaken." Julian let out a bitter laugh. To outsiders, it seemed he had gone mad. But as the husband who had spent 9 years with Nina, he trusted his judgment. Yet, in the face of his repeated tests, Serene always had solid evidence to explain things away. It wasn't until he saw the charity gala invitation Dexter handed him that the man had a sudden awakening. The little mute's only relatives in H City were the Jennings family. Besides them, she often went to the orphanage. So, if a child from the orphanage was bullied, would she admit it? He immediately instructed his assistant to invite Serene out under the pretext of donating to the orphanage. Chapter 21, this was Julian Blackwood's first time visiting the orphanage. To his surprise, it was a lively place, filled with the cheerful chatter and laughter of children. He winked at the person he had arranged to be there beforehand. The person raised a hand and pushed down the boy named Sonny. Soon, the two were wrestling, with Sonny clearly getting the worst of it. When Serene saw this, her heart clenched. At Julian's signal, no one in the surrounding crowd stepped forward. "Mr. Blackwood, did you bring me here to watch children get bullied?" "Of course not. This boy, Sonny, was my wife's favorite." The moment Sonny saw Serene, he burst into tears. "Nina, my sister, help me." The little boy's eyes were filled with tears, and he even started to use sign language, their secret code. Serene's heart twisted painfully, and her eyes turned alarmingly red. Her hand involuntarily lifted, wanting to sign back to comfort the boy. But her peripheral vision caught Julian's look of smug certainty, and she sighed. She frowned and turned to leave, but the man grabbed her wrist tightly. "Miss Fairlight, why are your eyes red? Do you feel sorry for this child?" Serene struggled to break free, her gaze like ice. "Sand got in my eye, I rubbed it red. I have no interest in bullying. Mr. Blackwood, your desperate attempts to test me are pointless. Your wife is dead, and that's that." Julian's eyes were bloodshot as he stared at Serene, but apart from her red eyes, there was no other reaction. If it had been the little mute, she would have rushed forward to stop it and question him. After a long time, the man lowered his head, tears blurring his vision. "I'm sorry, I was mistaken. You can go." Meanwhile, Julian's persistent pursuit of Serene had also caught the attention of Aaron Sawyer. Before Serene appeared, he had been in a daze. Now, Julian was fawning over a woman who looked very much like Nina. Was it really because she was a substitute, or was there something more to it? Aaron caressed the urn in his hands. The scene of him personally cremating the girl was still vivid in his mind. Logically, it was impossible for someone to be resurrected. But was Julian really unable to tell the difference? He could see it clearly. The love in that man's eyes was no act. He suddenly remembered the girl's cooling pulse in the ambulance. "I'll repay you in the next life." Aaron murmured the words, gently resting his head against the slightly cool urn. After a long time, he sighed and decided to meet this Serene Fairlight. "Hello, this is Aaron Sawyer. Miss Fairlight, I'd like to meet with you. I feel that you bear a strong resemblance to a dear friend of mine who has passed. Would that be convenient for you?" Serene felt a sense of relief upon hearing Aaron's voice. She knew her appearance would inevitably arouse suspicion from people from her past, but she wasn't afraid. Especially not of Aaron, who had helped her. "Of course, Dr. Sawyer. I also feel that you look familiar." Aaron was surprised by how readily Serene agreed. Beneath his apprehension, there was a spark of excitement. Could Serene be Nina, or was there some connection between them? Aaron eagerly set a time and rushed to a seaside restaurant. It was the quietest and most exclusive French restaurant in H City, notoriously difficult to book. But Aaron had booked the entire place, ordered flowers, and pre-tasted the menu, all to ensure Serene would be pleased. When Serene arrived, she saw Aaron leaning back in his chair, gazing at the distant sea. He looked just as calm and composed as he had all those years ago when she had first sought him out for plastic surgery. "Hello, Dr. Sawyer." Serene smiled and sat down across from the man, only to freeze when she saw the urn in his lap. Although he had seen photos of Serene, seeing her in person, he felt she was an exact replica of Nina, the only difference being that Serene was not mute. "Hello, Miss Fairlight. The friend I mentioned, you should know who she is. I was the one who had her cremated, but I couldn't bring myself to dispose of the ashes. I'm not afraid of her blaming me, I just wanted to." Serene shook her head, a playful glint in her eyes. In her 9 years in this world, she hadn't made many friends. Aaron had helped her so much, she didn't want to hide it from him. She trusted his character. "Dr. Sawyer, all I know is that your friend wouldn't blame you because she is right in front of you." Chapter 22, Aaron's eyes widened, and the urn in his hands clattered to the floor with a heavy thud. After a long moment, his voice trembled. "Nina Sterling, you?" "Yes, I'm fine. Long time no see." Hearing the girl's confirmation, Aaron's heart couldn't help but tremble. A dead person, resurrected with a new identity, it was all too strange. But now that it was happening to Nina, he didn't want to press for details. "How can you prove you're her? What if you're an imposter? And how can you speak now? The fact that I'm sitting here should be proof enough, shouldn't it? As for how I am now, that's a secret." Aaron stared blankly for a moment, then let out a laugh. "So that's how it is. Does Julian Blackwood know?" I don't love him. What happens to him has nothing to do with me. I am Serene Fairlight, not that little mute." Serene cut her steak with an air of nonchalance, winking with a smile. "I actually have a sister named Violet. I stayed by Julian's side for her. I suppose you could say my suffering has finally paid off." Aaron was amused by Serene's dramatic expression. The moment the girl said she didn't love Julian, a wave of joy surged through his heart. Compared to the scarred little mute of the past, she was much happier now. Aaron picked up the urn and handed it to the girl across from him. "Well then, returning this to its rightful owner." Serene looked at the sandalwood box, her hand unconsciously tightening. She lifted her head and gazed at the vast, boundless blue sea in the distance. "Dr. Sawyer, the restaurant you chose today is quite convenient for me." Serene stood up, opened the sandalwood box, and walked to the window, cupping the ashes in her hands. The next second, the door was kicked open by Julian. He had been trying to convince himself to give up, but when he learned that Aaron had sought out Serene, he couldn't control his excitement. Aaron and the little mute had a close relationship. Did their meeting prove that Serene was the little mute? Were all of Serene's previous explanations just a front to keep him at bay? But now, opening the door to see the woman holding an urn, Julian's heart instantly tensed. "Don't those are the little mute's ashes?" Serene turned, a laugh escaping her lips. But her fingers relaxed and her left hand lost its strength. The urn plummeted into the sea. The mute, in that instant, the man's heart felt like it was being torn apart. Without a second's hesitation, he leaped into the sea. It wasn't until the icy water shocked his senses that he realized the box was completely soaked and slowly sinking to the bottom. Julian could only hold his breath and swim desperately toward the depths. Leaning against the window, Serene watched the disappearing figure, her heart skipping a beat, but mostly, she found it laughable. When Nina Sterling was dying, he didn't care. Now that she was dead, Julian was jumping into the sea for her ashes. How ironic. Inside the restaurant, his assistant was already dumbfounded. He never imagined Mr. Blackwood would jump into the sea. Someone help get down there and save Mr. Blackwood, find a professional diving team, a rescue team. The massive restaurant quickly descended into chaos. Serene, however, felt nothing, instead gesturing for Aaron to hurry up and eat. "Aren't you worried about Julian? I am Serene Fairlight. Why should I worry about a stranger? Those ashes were my property. I can dispose of them as I see fit." Julian was eventually pulled out. He was alive but unconscious, his face deathly pale. Glancing at the urn in the man's arms, Serene paused for a fraction of a second before quickly looking away. Just as she was about to leave, the assistant grabbed her. "Miss Fairlight, why did you throw away Mrs. Blackwood's urn? Do you have any idea how important that was to Mr. Blackwood?" "So what? Your mistress's dying wish was to have her ashes scattered in the sea. She's already dead. Is your Mr. Blackwood so unwilling to let the dead rest in peace?" Chapter 23, the assistant, faced with Serene's identical face, found himself at a loss for harsh words, yet he couldn't swallow his anger. Mr. Blackwood is just emotionally stunted. He loved Mrs. Blackwood very much. After she passed away, he was devastated for a long time. When he found out the truth and punished the Jennings family, he was already trying to make amends. Mrs. Blackwood. Serene let out a laugh. His love had always been for Rosalie. He had always been cold to his maid-like wife. Now trying to make amends to a dead person, what was the use? Meanwhile, in the hospital, the man, suffering from pulmonary edema, remained unconscious for a day and a night before finally waking up. He could never forget the look in Serene's eyes, cold and ruthless. When he had painstakingly retrieved the urn, the ashes inside had already dissolved into the water. He was furious but powerless to stop it. Julian coughed up blood, a violent act that brought him to his senses. His body was indeed failing. But no one would be there to patiently coax him into taking his medicine like the little mute did, and no one was willing to carefully help him manage his stomach problems. The girl who had loved him wouldn't even leave her ashes for him. His eyes stung with a dry ache. Julian stared at the ceiling and let out a low laugh. Considering Serene's composure when she threw the ashes, and the fact that Aaron, who had stubbornly refused to hand them over before, had acquiesced to her actions, it all pointed to one thing. And with Aaron's attitude towards Serene, plus all the suspicious things he had discovered before, everything seemed to indicate that Serene was Nina. The man's breathing became ragged, and the warning alarm on the ventilator beeped frantically. The assistant, terrified, rushed in to check, only to find his boss, laughing. "Someone, help Mr. Blackwood, you have to take care of yourself even though Mrs. Blackwood is gone, the Jennings family is still out there. They're the ones who caused her death. You can't die." Julian, who had closed his eyes, snapped them open. He remembered. If he wanted to verify whether Serene was truly Nina, Rosalie was an essential piece of the puzzle. He turned his gaze and quietly instructed his assistant. He immediately dialed Serene's number. "Miss Fairlight, I know you're still looking for business partners. Blackwood Enterprises can help. The condition is that you come to my home in 3 days to meet with me." At that moment, Serene was arranging flowers with her sister, Violet. Hearing the man's voice on the phone, a shadow of sorrow crossed Violet's eyes. "Serene, isn't he the man who bullied you before? Don't see him. You shouldn't care about people like that, even if they die." Serene smiled and reassured her sister. "It's fine, it's just business. Don't you trust me, sister?" Under Serene's playful coaxing, Violet reluctantly agreed, only insisting that her sister take plenty of bodyguards. 3 days later, Serene, with her entourage of bodyguards, entered the Blackwood estate with practiced ease. Without needing a maid to guide her, she quickly arrived at the main building where the man lived. When she saw Julian again, he was sitting alone in a wheelchair, his head bowed, his figure exuding a sense of loneliness. "Mr. Blackwood, I'm here. What about the collaboration?" The man immediately looked up, and only then did Serene notice the ring in his hand. It was their wedding ring, one that Julian had casually had his assistant pick out. She used to like wearing it, but one time, after Julian saw it, he had angrily berated her. "Don't think wearing that ring makes you my wife know your place. You little mute." At that time, Nina, who still had some feelings for Julian, had a rude awakening. She was just a mission completer. She shouldn't do anything that didn't fit her role. "You're here, Nina. I just wanted to hand Rosalie over to you for you to deal with." The next moment, a woman covered in wounds was dragged out. Rosalie, already in a daze, was terrified at the sight of Serene. "You're Nina Sterling?" "No, she's dead. When I hit her, she was on the verge of death." "Who are you?" Serene's eyes, full of amusement, turned to Julian. "Mr. Blackwood, you're so certain I'm your dead wife. Are you letting me vent my anger now?" The man's heart instantly tensed. He immediately nodded. The denial that was on the tip of Serene's tongue was swallowed. After the previous tests and her nonchalant disposal of the ashes, even if she didn't admit it today, Julian wouldn't give up. She then thought of the injuries she had seen on little Sonny when she visited him yesterday, and she finally made up her mind. "I am indeed the person Mr. Blackwood is looking for, and Miss Jennings has bullied Nina Sterling quite a bit in the past, framing, whipping, burning." With every word she spoke, Julian's face turned a shade paler. Serene nodded to the bodyguards behind her, and Rosalie was quickly gagged and tied up. "Then let's give her a taste of her own medicine. I think Miss Sterling would be pleased." For the next few hours, the entire Blackwood living room echoed with Rosalie's whimpers and pleas for mercy. Julian stood by silently, occasionally stealing glances at Serene's profile, feeling as if he were sitting on pins and needles. The little mute was taking her revenge on Rosalie right in front of him, which already confirmed her identity. But would she forgive him? Chapter 24, Serene stretched lazily, then lifted Julian's chin. Seeing the mix of fear and anticipation on the man's face, she suddenly smiled. "Mr. Blackwood, I've changed my entire identity, and still you've latched onto me. Do you want me to forgive you?" Julian's pupils contracted sharply. "Little mute, eyes," Serene covered the man's mouth and shook her head. "I'm very petty. Mr. Blackwood should know that Rosalie dared to bully the little mute because you were her accomplice. Do you know how much pain she was in when she died?" Do you know how much suffering she swallowed because she couldn't speak? You don't know any of it. So you see, Julian Blackwood, your love is truly cheap. Tears welled in the man's eyes, falling onto the back of Serene's hand. He suddenly fell to his knees, his voice hoarse. Nina, please give me a chance. Did you know Rosalie's child wasn't mine? I did those things just to make you love me more. Nina, I just want you to forgive me. I don't want the partnerships. I don't want the Blackwood family. Nina, I can't live without you. A sharp pain shot through Serene's chest. She shook her head, a smile on her face, as she unhesitatingly pried his tightly gripping hands off her. But the little mute is dead. You killed her. I don't want to forgive you on her behalf. Julian looked at the girl before him in disbelief. The taste of blood in his mouth was both sickening and sobering. He was right. His little mute wasn't a doormat. She had every right to be angry. But he wanted to apologize, to make amends, and she wouldn't give him the chance. He looked up at the girl's profile. The hardship she endured to come back to life, the fact that she was no longer mute, she must have suffered so much. And he knew nothing of it, had no part in it. A profound sense of powerlessness washed over him. He could only watch as the girl left with a blank expression, just as he had once unhesitatingly abandoned her for Rosalie. Julian turned his head to look at the bloody mess that was Rosalie, a wave of desolation washing over him. As Serene left the Blackwood estate, she chose not to take a car. She walked out of the villa complex alone. The scenery was familiar. She had walked this road for 9 years. She knew how many poplar trees lined the path. As she entered the city, a beggar suddenly crawled towards her. "Miss, please help us. My son's arm is gone. Could you lend us some money?" Serene found the voice familiar. A closer look revealed it was Martha Jennings. "You, Nina Sterling, you're not dead, it's all your fault. You faked your death and Julian went crazy, taking it out on the Jennings family. The Jennings family went bankrupt. Are you satisfied now? I am Serene Fairlight, the heiress of the Fairlight family. You've got the wrong person." Serene shook her head and tried to walk away, but Martha clung to her tightly. Just then, Richard Jennings came over, pulling a cart on which a gasping Leo Jennings lay. "I don't believe you. I gave birth to Nina Sterling. I know what she looks like. Please save us. And your brother, you can't just watch him die." Serene glanced down at the 3 pathetic figures, feeling a mix of calm and disgust. When she was first brought back to the Jennings family, Leo had bullied and beaten her relentlessly. Richard and Martha had just turned a blind eye. Back then, being young and with the timid nature she had developed in the orphanage, she hadn't dared to fight back. This was karma. "Let go. If you don't, I'm calling the police." Serene shoved Martha away, but Leo woke up. Seeing Serene, he burst into tears. "Sister, save us. We're your family. Help me, please. I'll never do it again." Serene frowned. Once upon a time, Leo had doted on Rosalie and repeatedly bullied and framed her. Now it was just laughable. "You really have the wrong person. I am Serene Fairlight. Your sister is mute." "Hello, 911. There are some beggars harassing and trying to extort me." As Serene watched the 3 being led away by the police, she finally let out a laugh. "Nina Sterling, you crazy woman, we're your parents, you'll die a horrible death. You little bitch, how dare you do this to me, I'll skin you alive." Serene listened as the curses from the police car faded into the distance, feeling a sense of relief. Her special assistant, standing beside her, found the CEO's behavior strange. He looked at the dozens of missed calls from Julian on his phone and decided to answer. "The Jennings family found your CEO, right? Give me your CEO's statement. I have other evidence that will ensure they never see the light of day again." The special assistant glanced at Serene. Seeing her nod, he breathed a sigh of relief. He didn't quite understand why the late Mrs. Blackwood's relatives and husband all claimed his CEO was the former Mrs. Blackwood. It was all very strange. Chapter 25, when Serene saw the sentencing documents for the Jennings family, a smile touched her lips. 1 10-year sentence, 2 15-year sentences, and 1 life sentence. The thought of the 3 Jennings family members spending their future in prison brought Serene a sense of profound satisfaction. Meanwhile, Julian Blackwood did not wallow in despair. After confirming Serene's identity, he began a new round of relentless pursuit. Every day Serene went to the office, she would be greeted by a large bouquet of red roses, accompanied by his handwritten apologies. "Nina, I was wrong. Please give me a chance. When she left work, she would receive all sorts of milk teas and small cakes. After a few days, even the employees and receptionists who had initially helped her throw away the flowers and gifts began to hesitate. Wherever Serene went, Julian found a way to have someone arrange a gathering just for a chance encounter. His close friends teased him. "You were never this good to Rosalie. And that little mute, she just seemed to revolve around you. This is the first time I've seen you put so much effort into chasing someone." Julian smiled bitterly, downing one glass of wine after another. Not far away, Serene was laughing and chatting, holding her own among the old foxes of H City's business world. Suddenly, an old CEO, holding a glass of wine, sidled up to Serene. "I've heard of the Fairlight family's wealth, a renowned family in the capital city. I wonder if your elders have any plans for a marriage alliance." The previously boisterous party immediately fell silent. Julian couldn't help but grip his wine glass tighter. "No, to be honest with you all, I can't even handle the number of suitors I already have. Marriage alliances are not for me." A wave of laughter erupted from the crowd, but the man felt his heart ache even more. His friend beside him poked him. "Looks like you have a long road ahead of you. Seriously, you're the widower, Mr. Blackwood. If I were a girl, I'm not sure I'd want to marry you. Bad temper, picky." With every word, Julian's face turned a shade paler. His heart began to pound with panic. The thought of the little mute having a new boyfriend brought a suffocating feeling that made it hard for Julian to breathe. So, when the social event ended, Julian, under the watchful eyes of the gossiping crowd, asked Serene to stay behind. "Nina, were you just saying that on purpose? I know how much you loved me before. Please, I'm begging you, give me another chance to atone for my sins." Finally, the man broke down in tears, kneeling at Serene's feet. "As long as you forgive me, I'll do anything. Nina, please don't ignore me, Nina." Serene bent down, a wicked idea suddenly forming in her mind. "Then you can be my lapdog, the great CEO Blackwood. After all, you should know my preferences." And so, a strange phenomenon appeared in H City's elite circles. When the heiress of the Fairlight family, Serene Fairlight, went to business meetings, Julian Blackwood was at the forefront. Whenever someone tried to make Serene drink, he would drink it all himself, ending up in the hospital but never giving up. When Serene went to parties, Julian would follow. When Serene lost a game of dares, he would even voluntarily take the punishment and bark like a dog. The young masters and ladies present were terrified, but Serene laughed happily, even nodding in approval. At a dinner party, Serene mentioned she liked gentle, refined-looking men and laughingly told Julian to get plastic surgery. He agreed. The series of events was both absurd and bizarre. Only Julian's close friends found it familiar. "Julian, I remember your little mute wife used to do these things for you, right?" The tables have really turned. He had expected Julian to argue, but to his surprise, his friend simply nodded. He even started asking for advice on how to win back someone he had hurt. His friends felt their worldviews shatter. They had known Julian for over 20 years, and this was the first time they had seen him so consumed by love. "No, I mean there are plenty of fish in the sea, you—" "Shut up, she's different. I was the one who wronged her." The others couldn't say any more, so they could only watch as Julian clumsily and desperately tried to win Serene's favor. Chapter 26, after being discharged from the hospital, Julian immediately went to Serene's side. The man's face had lost its hard, cold edge, and his smile was more like a spring breeze, though the muscles beneath were still stiff. He began to learn to cook 3 meals a day for Serene, even shamelessly going to the Fairlight residence to learn from Violet. "Miss Fairlight, please teach me. I truly want to apologize to Nina. She cooked for me countless times before. I want to understand her preferences too." The first time Violet saw Julian, she was furious. This was the man who had bullied her sister. But the second time, the third time, and after hearing about all the things he had done for her sister, a complicated feeling stirred within her. What was the use of belated affection? Her sister would never regret her decisions. She had heard he had been a man of privilege since birth, that even making porridge was a difficult task for him. Yet, he didn't make a sound even when his hands were burned. The dishes he made at first were terrible, but he gritted his teeth and ate them all himself. He knew her sister preferred vegetarian food and tried every way to create balanced meals for her. Once, he even cut his finger badly but didn't disturb anyone, Listening to her sister's reports, Serene felt a mix of irony and surprise. She had humiliated Julian as revenge, but she had never considered getting back with him. So, the next day, Serene accepted an invitation from a suitor, deliberately staying out until midnight. At that time, Julian was still waiting in the dining room, as Serene had intentionally stood him up. When the man saw Serene return, he immediately put on a smile. "Nina, you're finally back. Did something come up?" The man's words died in his throat. His eyes fell on the kiss mark on Serene's neck and the smudged lipstick at the corner of her mouth. He froze. "It's nothing. You don't have to come anymore. I'm tired of this game. Let's go our separate ways." The man's brow furrowed tightly, his eyes pleading. "Nina, don't send me away, please. I want to cook for you. Look, I made all of this." "Nina, please stay away from other men, okay?" Serene smiled and shook her head. "In what capacity are you asking me? As a lover, a husband, or a lapdog?" Julian bit his lip and said nothing. He suddenly remembered how, in the past, if he had the scent of perfume on him, Serene would be completely unfazed. His lips trembled as he painfully asked the question he had deliberately ignored. "Nina, why did you love me before? Why did you insist on staying by my side for 9 years?" Serene laughed, her voice full of mockery. "Did you really think I was madly in love with you? To be honest, I stayed by your side for my sister's sake. After all, I have no interest in being a substitute. One can pretend to be in love even when they're not." In an instant, the advantage Julian thought he had vanished. His amber eyes were filled with disbelief, but then he felt it was plausible. Because she had never truly loved him, she could leave without hesitation. And he had fallen deeper and deeper into a world of pain. Julian left the Fairlight residence in a daze, but he was unwilling to give up. His mind replayed the past 9 years, the sweet moments they had shared, and he suddenly coughed up a mouthful of blood. Find out who the man with Serene today was. Bring him to the Blackwood estate. His assistant rubbed his forehead and could only nod. Julian, already suffering from a splitting headache, became enraged when he saw a man named Leo Song kissing Serene. "I'm telling you, stay away from Serene. She has a boyfriend," Leo Song, who was initially confused, burst out laughing. "I don't think Miss Fairlight has acknowledged you, Mr. Blackwood. We're, at best, in fair competition. I'm younger than you, and after all, Miss Fairlight didn't reject me last night." Veins bulged on the man's arm, but he still managed to suppress his anger. "Then what will it take for you to leave? $10 million? Name your price." Leo Song smiled maliciously, staring straight at the man before him. "Mr. Blackwood, you may have money, but my Song family is not lacking either. I am very much looking forward to becoming the Fairlight family's son-in-law." As the last word fell, Julian had already broken free from his bodyguards and kicked Leo Song. Faced with Julian's barrage of punches and kicks, Leo Song was also furious. Neither man would back down, and the fight only ended when they were pulled apart by their respective bodyguards. Aaron Sawyer, who had rushed to the scene upon hearing the news, was surprised. He had been abroad for a month on business, and the moment he returned, he heard that his cousin was pursuing Serene and had gotten into a fight with Julian. He said nothing, thinking about the things he had heard recently, and a wave of frustration washed over him. After much deliberation, he finally called Serene. "Serene, about my cousin? What about him? He was just a pawn for me to get rid of Julian. Are you trying to say Julian hit him? I'll compensate for his medical expenses, don't worry." "No, that's not it. I wanted to ask why you didn't come to me. Nina, I want to ask, can you give me a chance? A chance to try and pursue you." Chapter 27. On the other end of the line, Serene gasped. Was Aaron Sawyer confessing his feelings to her? He had certainly helped her, but she knew they were just friends. "I'm sorry, but I'm going to pretend I didn't hear that today. We're still friends. Please tell your cousin I'll cover his medical expenses." The line went dead. Aaron lowered his head in resignation. He knew she was a cold-hearted person, but somewhere along the line, he had fallen for her. The next day, Serene summoned the executives and shareholders of Fairlight Corp. And proposed a hostile takeover of Blackwood Enterprises. Seeing her determination and confidence, the board let her proceed. Thus, Serene began to scrutinize all collaborations related to Blackwood Enterprises, even openly competing with them for business. At first, Julian was unconcerned, then disbelieving. "Nina, why are you trying to ruin Blackwood Enterprises, Nina?" "There's no reason. I was by your side for many years. I know how clean or dirty Blackwood Enterprises is. This is just normal business competition. Julian listened to the girl's cold, angry voice and found it laughable. He didn't believe Serene could be so ruthless. But in the following days, scandals involving inflated project costs and concealed material data at Blackwood Enterprises frequently trended on social media. Although Julian immediately had the trending topics removed and issued denials, Blackwood Enterprises' market value and stock still evaporated by billions. He tried to find Serene to get her to stop, but he was in a car accident. A battered and bruised Rosalie Jennings stumbled from the driver's seat and, with a smile, plunged a knife into his body. "It's karma, Julian Blackwood. I heard Blackwood Enterprises is on the brink of collapse, and it's all because of that woman, Serene. Did you know I escaped from prison? It's all your fault for handing me over to that crazy woman, Serene. You love her so much, but she doesn't care about you. It hurts, doesn't it? Julian Blackwood, we both deserve this." Rosalie's scarred face looked sinister in the light as she ran off, triumphant. Julian was in so much pain his face was contorted, and he collapsed by the side of the road. It was an employee of Blackwood Enterprises who eventually found their boss lying in the parking lot, his life hanging by a thread. By the time he was taken to the hospital, he was in critical condition. When Serene heard about Julian's accident, she immediately collaborated with the internal shareholders of Blackwood Enterprises and, in just 1 week, acquired the company. Julian lay in the hospital for a full half-month before waking up. Not only had he been amputated and was now in a wheelchair, but his lungs had also developed problems, requiring him to be on a ventilator daily. His assistant couldn't bear to tell him the news that Blackwood Enterprises had gone bankrupt and been acquired, but he saw it for himself on television. Serene, as the lead figure of the acquisition, giving her opinion. He never imagined the little mute could be so heartless, but then again, Julian felt it was to be expected. The little mute was no longer the person who would stay silent when he bullied her. She had been completely transformed into a powerful woman, and it seemed he could no longer keep up with her. When he woke up again, the man couldn't even make a sound. The doctor explained it was due to a blood clot from the accident pressing on a nerve, and he could only recover slowly. Julian now understood what it felt like to be mute. He had to rely on typing on his phone to communicate with others, just like Nina Sterling years ago. The frustration and difficulty made him realize how hard it must have been for the little mute. And in the month and a half he was sick, Serene didn't visit him once. Even the villa he had lived in was repossessed by the bank, and his shares had been carved up by the old foxes at Blackwood Enterprises. Therefore, after his wounds healed, Julian had no choice but to leave the hospital and move into a rental apartment he would have looked down on before. The man painstakingly cleaned the room, and finally, looking at the news pushed to his phone, his eyes turned red. Serene Fairlight, the heiress of Fairlight Corp., recently stepped down from her position and has gone abroad for further studies. Aaron Sawyer, the young master of the Sawyer family, has gone abroad for love. The accompanying photo was of the two of them smiling at the airport boarding gate. A sharp pain shot through Julian's chest. It was then that he was forced to admit it. The little mute was living well without him, and he had somehow lost her. When the assistant found Julian, his body was already cold. The autopsy later revealed he had died of a stroke. Since Julian's parents had passed away long ago, he had no choice but to call Serene, who was abroad. "Miss Fairlight?" "No, Mrs. Blackwood. Mr. Blackwood has passed away. What are your wishes for the arrangements?" Serene sighed, a sense of wistfulness washing over her. In the end, she decided to choose a good burial plot for him, a final gesture to close the chapter on their 9 years together. She knew that Nina Sterling belonged to the past, and with Julian's death, she should focus on her future. For the rest of her life, she would just be Serene.